Today we are honored to host two experts on this topic. First is Deborah Reuter, Director of Center for Students with Disabilities at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, and Larry Alterman, Manager of East Coast Recruitment at Michigan State University, also the President of New Jersey Association for College Admission Counseling. On behalf of the Navigate 2020 event sponsor, GoToCollegeFairs, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our panelists, and thank you so much again for taking the time to present on this important topic. Let's begin.
Hello there, this is Debbie Reuter, and welcome to our session talking about access and disability services for students transitioning to post-secondary education. I think my video was off there. Sorry about that.
No problem, there you go.
So hopefully everybody heard me. Welcome to our session on access and disability services. Larry and I are going to talk about transitioning to post-secondary as a student with a disability. And we're glad that you could join us for this session. I think we're just waiting to get our slideshow up. Great. So I am the interim director for the Center for Students with Disabilities at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. And Larry is the manager of East Coast Recruitment at Michigan State University. So a little bit about University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. We are a four-year public university in South Central Wisconsin, a little bit more of a rural area, about an hour away from Milwaukee and Madison, sort of in the middle there. We have 13,000 students. We serve students for associate's degrees all the way through doctoral programs. University of Wisconsin-Whitewater is a flagship in Wisconsin and known for serving students with disabilities. We hold really the highest standard for universal design in our physical environment, as well as working with faculty on universal design for learning in the curriculum. We, in our office, really hold the philosophy of disability as a social and social justice model of disability, that it's really the environment that needs to be addressed. So we've had a priority mission for many years and have served about 10% of our students through the Disability Service Office. We're also nationally recognized for our men's and women's wheelchair basketball team. And Larry will share a little bit about Michigan State.
Yes, thank you, Debbie, very much. Michigan State University, a four-year public university in the lower center part of the state of Michigan. We're a large school, including graduate students. We are very close to 50,000 students, all on one main campus. We offer everything from associate's degrees to doctoral programs, and we are a land-grant university, and so there's always a priority mission to create access for all students across our campus. We do have a very active resource center for persons with disability, where we have a wide range of services that we can provide and accommodations we can provide for students. Also, as part of our cross-campus collaboration, our College of Engineering, their design day, which they have every year, there are always some projects that are about providing further accessibility for students on campus. So this is very much part of our active culture at Michigan State University.
Okay, thanks. So students with these disabilities succeed in college, and at Whitewater we have a lot of success with students who identify with our office and use the variety of services that we offer. We have close to 10% of our student population at Whitewater who identifies as a student with a disability and applies for services through our office. And I think the national average is pretty much around 7 to 9% of students who also use accommodations in higher ed. So it's really a common experience for faculty to work with students with disabilities. It's not a big surprise for them to make accommodations, and these are some of the kinds of disabilities that students who come to our office have. However, historically, learning disabilities and ADHD have been the most significant disabilities that students coming to college identify with, though we do see and have seen over the years a big increase of students with psychological disabilities, anxiety, and major depression who are also now realizing they can benefit from accommodations in college. And of course, students on the autism spectrum that we support significantly in many ways. And another rise we're seeing this year has been in chronic health conditions. So all of those are things that students do bring with them when they come to college. So the laws that protect students in higher ed are slightly different from what students and parents may be used to in K through 12. So in K through 12, students are protected under IDEA, and the school is required to identify students and create a plan for them to succeed and get through their education. In higher ed, students are protected by Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act and Americans with Disabilities Act and Amendments Act. This is, we refer to this as the ADA. The ADA is a civil rights law, and it's another sometimes question we get around why are offices called disability service offices sometimes. Some offices recognize themselves as access primarily. We tend to keep the language of disability in our office as a way for students to identify where to go when they need services. And for some students in high school, they're a little confused by that, or they may not identify as a student with a disability. But for other students, we recognize that disability is a big part of their identity. And you know, a big piece of people's intersectionality when they're identifying their own individual disability. So you will find that some offices are called disability service offices and others are just called access offices. And so now students under these laws are required to identify themselves as the student with a disability and make the request for their accommodations. They're not just automatically granted. An IEP or 504 plan doesn't just automatically transfer with the student to higher ed. Now the student is in charge of requesting those accommodations, but universities really are required and encourage full and equal participation in everything for students with disabilities. So a student with a disability who has any substantial effect on their major life activity can apply for services with one of these offices. I think Larry's gonna talk a little bit now about college admissions, and we'll come back to some more details about disability services.
Great, thank you so much. So I want to talk a little bit about the college admissions process and about maybe some things that all students should think about, and that maybe some in the audience who've decided to come for this session may want to think about just a little bit additional information. So I think first of all, when you're thinking about college admissions, when you're thinking about the next level of just education beyond high school, there's a lot of options. And so I think certainly options for some will be better than options for others. You know, certainly technical colleges, an associate degree, a four-year public school, a four-year private school, maybe a combination. I think some of that depends on you as the student. I think students, if you're out there, I think you need to really ask yourself the question, are you ready to fully be out there, be away from home? Do you need an option where you're living at home for a variety of different reasons? Sometimes this is also just a little bit about maturity, both socially, emotionally. There could be a lot of different pieces to this. But I think also as you explore some of this will become clearer what might be a good fit for you. And you'll hear me use that word fit several times. But, you know, you need to think, how much do your parents really do for you? Could you use more transition time? You know, possibly you want to take classes for a year in a community college, but maybe not. Maybe you're really ready to move on and move on in a different way. Maybe it's going right away from home as well. When you're going through this process, I couldn't overestimate the importance of asking questions, but I also couldn't overestimate the importance of really taking detailed notes on the answers. And you will have chances to ask questions, but also I think investigate a lot online. And when you're investigating online and you're asking questions and you're looking to get questions answered, I would really point you to look specifically at the college or university websites that you are investigating. The reason I say that is some third-party sites may not always be updated as frequently as a college and university's site. But certainly you should understand the cost of attendance. Now let me even talk about what cost of attendance is. Cost of attendance is more than just what tuition and fees and room and board might be. But it's also things like books and spending money and whatever money you might spend on travel to an individual, you know, college, university, any place for higher ed. Secondly, that location. How close to home do you want to be? What kind of weather? You might think that the weather in Whitewater, Wisconsin and East Lansing, Michigan is ideal. That may be exactly what you're looking for. Some of you may find that 1 or 2 degrees too cold. And so you may want to look somewhere else. But that's part of location. Available majors. And you know, that word is plural for a reason. If you look, Google when you get a chance, what percentage of students change their major in the course of 4 years. And that's because this is all part of discovery, you know, in terms of discovering about you, discovering about different academic opportunities that are out there. And so you should ask not just about majors, but also how easy is it to change a major? Do you have that kind of flexibility at a school? And you need to assess for yourself, again, how important these things are. The size of the school, that's important, but I think also assessing the size of the program. Even at a school as large as Michigan State, we have some very small programs, some programs that might be smaller than other places have, but maybe even that program is too small for you. And so that's part of that questioning and asking follow-up questions. What's the reputation of the school? And when I say reputation, not just maybe what they're ranked, but what is the campus culture like? What is the support like? What is the environment like? What is the off-campus location like? All these are important factors because if it's a 4-year school, this might be a place that you're even living for 4 years. So you almost can't ask too many questions. I think students with disability, there's a lot of questions to ask as well. Disability services, what is offered? What's even the spirit in how it's offered? I can kind of guarantee if you check on websites, you'll start to get information. But then as you reach out to those offices, you'll see how you're greeted, how quickly you're responded to. That will help you. What are the general education and major requirements? And how do these fit for you? You know, I always remember the time a few years ago, I was talking to a student who was thinking they might come to Michigan State, and it was April, and they were interested in engineering, but they didn't realize how much math was part of engineering. And that's why it's so important. Ask these questions, do the research. The more research you do, the better prepared you'll be, the better fit you will potentially have for yourself. What is the class size? So class size is actually probably a lot more important than faculty to student ratio, because class size is actually the class that you will be sitting in. Going along with this too, what is even the teaching styles offered? This is all, I think, important in this process. In terms of tutoring options, what is available? Both, I would say, through disability services, but also across campus. Some campuses have a lot of tutoring options. Some may not have as many. And this is important for you to plan for yourself. What kind of placement tests are required at a particular institution of higher education? What is accessibility like on campus? So I think this is one of those things that you both ask the question, and then when you do a campus visit, this is, I think, a critical component of a campus visit, of really understanding the buildings you're going to. And what does that accessibility look like? What does accessibility look like in terms of housing? And what sort of housing options are available? This is all very much part of it. In terms of personal care options, what is available? What adaptive and assistive technology is available? And are there summer bridge programs? Are there ways to get acclimated with services, with the campus, with academic life? When you visit, we really recommend you meet with disability services. And I think you should find out what sort of options of meetings you can have to learn about transition programs or camps. And, the variables, this is a very individual process. And so understanding the types of support you feel you're going to need and investigating those on site will make a great difference. And definitely we feel the right fit is important. Where do you feel comfortably, emotionally, and academically, and with the services you need? That's so important. We certainly encourage you to work with your school counselors as well to be sure you are asking the right questions when you visit and when you're speaking with folks from the university. Now, there'll be some big differences between high school and college. So in high school, under normal times, when you're not in Zoom land or remote, you're in school probably about 35 hours a week, roughly 6 to 8 hours a day. On a college campus, maybe 12, maybe 15 hours a week in class. So now you have all this free time. Well, with this free time, how you structure your day, structure your time, will make a huge difference in your success. But, usually it's felt that you need about 2 to 3 hours of prep time for each hour in class. Exams and tests in high school can be often. In the college level, it may be only 2 to 4 times per semester. In terms of classes, basically you need to get a C or better in college to keep going. Where in high school, if you're doing just maybe the average, you can kind of get by. In terms of a support team, you may not have the same one person all the time. It may change over time. And so you need to have that flexibility to be able to make changes. The last thing I would say, I just think that's so important. If you're talking to somebody like myself from college admissions, do not be afraid to ask questions. Do not be afraid to ask about services. We want to help you. The more we know of what you need, the more we can provide you the information you need. Now, in terms of assessing services, Debbie is going to get started for us.
Okay, Thanks. Yeah, I really want to emphasize it's really about empowering yourself and being your own self-advocate. So you really need to be thinking about putting yourself in the driver's seat. Sometimes students, when they come to college, don't want to identify through the Students with Disabilities office because they think they want to give it a try on their own, or they don't want to be in special ed. But it's really more about looking for services that are going to help you be successful. And you would do that in any other manner. You would seek out services that would be helpful to you. So some of the differences are, again, that students don't have an IEP or a 504 plan in college. They're not in special ed in college. They self-identify with the Disability Service Office and get accommodations through their accommodation plan. So this is something that they take the lead on. They're moving the ball forward. So students don't always have the same accommodations provided in high school. In high school, under the laws, it does allow for some modifications of curriculum or some different kinds of options for students. Maybe that's a modified test or retaking exams. If you're going to have a retake of exams in college, that's going to be your instructor's choice to allow all students to retake an exam. Typically aren't really allowed extended time on assignments like you are in high school, or notes for exams. Sometimes students will ask about having their note card for the math exam, and if the faculty allows every student to have notes for the exam, that might be an option, but most typically for students, that's not an accommodation. So again, we're providing access to the curriculum, we're providing access to the campus, but we're not in any way going to fundamentally change or alter the curriculum for students. And another thing to keep in mind is FERPA. So again, you are the owner of your information. You're an adult now, you're the person who's in charge of that information. So you may have had more help previously with parents intervening or helping. Now you would have to give permission and access to a parent to get the information. And I would say it's now is a good time for you in high school to start being the one communicating to your parents about how you're doing, rather than having parents communicating with instructors. Because once you get to college, it's going to be you as the adult that needs to be taking responsibility and not having parents helping out as much as they sometimes like. I'm a parent, I know how parents sometimes like to help, but it's best for you to be in charge of that. So accessing services, again, in higher ed, you're there by choice. So if you choose to come to a disability service office, you need to come and identify and apply for services. So typically offices ask you to fill out an application that you want to get accommodation services, submit some sort of documentation, typically more than an IEP, and then you'll have an opportunity to meet with somebody in the disability service office. So this would be an intake appointment before your first semester begins, ideally. And I guess I want to focus on the fact that it's really an interactive process in college. So it's about coming to, again, advocate for yourself, seek out services that are going to be helpful to you, and learn how to be that best advocate. Learn how to request and use your accommodations, learn how to communicate with faculty and others about what your needs are. So that's a good time at that intake appointment to have some extra support from your parents in transitioning, but also about learning how to do this on your own. So a little bit more about documentation. This is often a question that we receive. If you have a condition that would require some medical documentation to be submitted, then that really just helps support the accommodation that you need, and helps us decide together what's going to help you become the most successful student in college. So providing that kind of documentation from your medical doctor, specialist, or a full neuropsychological report is going to give us the information we need to help know what's going to help you be successful. Now, an IEP plan may also be accepted, and that may be just fine if it includes the diagnostic information that we need to see, and it could be sufficient as a standalone documentation, but it should be the most recent IEP, and usually a summary of performance or a 504 plan is not going to be sufficient. So any additional supporting documentation, again, just helps us have a fuller understanding of what the functional limitation is for students and how we can best support that student. But it is the student's responsibility to provide the documentation to the office once they apply for services. And each college and university typically has a little bit of a different take on what they'll accept for documentation. But I will say that the guidance from our professional organization and the ADA is that it is an interactive process, and that really documentation alone is not the only thing that we're going on. We really want to hear from students. We want to have an open dialogue and discussion about what's going to be the most support for you. So again, you know, hopefully that it is completed by a licensed professional. You know, if it's for hearing loss or someone who's deaf or hard of hearing, having an audiology report is oftentimes helpful when it comes to looking at the right kinds of accommodations that student might need. If it's for psychological disability, anything from a neuropsych or psychologist can be helpful. It should be, again, appropriate to verify your eligibility and assess your functional limitations. So demonstrate the substantial impact to one or more life activity, and also just support the request. So pretty simple. Some of the most common accommodations that we see in college are often the same kinds of accommodations that you've had in high school, which would be extended time on exams in a low distraction room. And this is frequently provided through a disability service office. Sometimes it's provided through another testing office, but either way, some way for you to access an opportunity to have the exam in a low distraction area. It shouldn't be in the hallway outside your professor's doorway for office hours. It should be something that you feel is really going to accommodate you. And that's another good reason why you should come through the disability service office. For some students, the common accommodation might be captioning, sign language interpreting, note-taking assistance. This is something that has advanced a lot over the 10 or more years that I've been working with students with disabilities. So sometimes it could be somebody else giving you copies of their notes. Other times there are a lot of new technologies that are coming out all the time. And again, these are nice things for you to give a try while you're still in high school. So whether that's a smart pen or assistive note-taking software that you could test out, it's a good opportunity for you to try those things out in more of a low-stakes opportunity while you're still in high school. Things like having software that reads exams to you. You may have only had that experience with the ACT or SAT, but if your school has access to Kurzweil software or other assistive alternative text software, it's a good time to give that a try rather than relying on case managers to read exams, because that probably won't happen once you get to college. Using ebooks, those are also widely available now, so another good resource to start using right now if you're not already. And then any other assistive technology that may be available to you. So preparing for this next step in this transition, you know, my experience really has been that students with disabilities are often more prepared than other students because they've had the opportunity to work collaboratively about how they learn best. And so if you've already been doing that, great job. So, you know, using planners, finding ways to help organize you and get get through oftentimes working a little bit harder than other students. Those are all things that are going to have prepared you really well in higher ed. If you are using a lot of accommodations that may not be offered in college, or using a lot of extended times on assignments, things that may be a little bit more difficult to accommodate, again, it's probably a good time to think about how you can scale back on some of those things, like having a live reader for an exam rather than trying out something new like a software. Learning how to study. If that's been something that you've been resistant to work on as far as working with your case managers, maybe it's a good time to get an educational coach or meet with a therapist individually for your experience to get prepared for going away to college. Because managing time is a really big issue for a lot of people, and the more you can learn to manage your time well, I think the more successful you'll be. Practice advocating for yourself. So if you're in your final IEP meeting and your school hasn't let you lead that IEP meeting, maybe make that suggestion that it's time for you to take the lead on your education and you to lead the IEP meeting, or practice advocating for yourself with an instructor at your high school and another lower stakes opportunity. Approaching a faculty or an instructor that you have now and asking for help can help make that easier for you when you're in higher ed. Because sometimes students are intimidated to go to faculty office hours, but I can guarantee you when you do go, they're always thrilled to have you. And I think it's a really great opportunity to practice doing that. Practice asking for some extra support from your instructors now, because you may want to do that when you get to college. Another thing that I notice, sometimes students really don't understand what the functional limitation is of their disability. Or when we ask a student, what is your disability? Sometimes because that's not how it's referred to in high school as a disability, that can be confusing. But again, because we're talking about the laws in higher ed and how we identify often as adults, it's a good time to know, why are you getting accommodations? What does your IEP say? Is it that you have ADHD? Is it a reading disability? You know, just really understanding why you've been getting the additional support while you've been in high school, so that when you go on and you're on your own asking for that support, you know what those things are that you have to work to overcome a little bit more than maybe somebody else. And so if you also have the ability to connect with a vocational rehab counselor in your area, they're another great resource for you for transitioning. Sometimes students don't think about that, and parents maybe don't think that's a support that all students can get, but everybody can benefit from meeting with their vocational rehab person while they're still in high school and finding out what other supports would they assist with when a student goes to college. We have many students who get support with a additional tutoring program we offer through our office, or we also offer a summer bridge type of a program that students get support from vocational rehab services to attend. Those are all things that can help support you once you get to college to be successful and transition to graduating and getting a job, which is what we all want for everybody. So definitely look at all of the resources that are available to you and start practicing advocating now. Okay, I think we're at the very end. Larry and I have provided our emails to you, so if people have additional questions, I think we are moving on to question and answer now.
Great, thank you, Deborah and Larry. A lot of great information that you just shared, and I will remind our audience that this is recorded, and so you will be able to watch this over and over again if there was anything that you feel like that you missed. They will get processed overnight and will be posted tomorrow so that you can listen to this recording. So I thank you for this great information. As we begin to take some of the questions, please make sure that you have the question and answer box open in the webinar window. As I had instructed before, you can use that Q&A button that's on the Zoom toolbar. I have been monitoring it, and so there's a lot of great questions that have come in, and so we'll go ahead and jump in and take a look at those. I think the first one, and it was asked in a number of different ways, is a lot of questions about timing. So when do prospective students reach out to the college or university and the disability services? Is it while they're a prospect, and at what point should they engage?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And again, as Larry had said, it's never too early to start asking questions. And when you're on a tour, do you have an opportunity to go see the disability service office then, even as a junior? We offer at Whitewater, I'm just going to move my chat box out of the way. We offer some additional things like we have conferences for students all the way from middle school on to see what college is like. So those are really, it's not too early, but I would say if you know you're planning to attend college, if you're coming to an orientation in the spring or the summer, go ahead and make an appointment to come in and talk to disability services then. But for some of our students who are especially anxious, or some of the students who are on the autism spectrum that have a little more stress around transition, I think even earlier is better. Having an open conversation even earlier about what to expect. Maybe that's, again, junior year or fall of senior year is fine.
Great, thank you. Someone writes in here, I am chronically ill and would need early access to choose my classes to assure they are later in the day because mornings are worse for her. How can I make sure this is an option for her?
Again, I think that having early contact, the more complex a student's disability is, the earlier the contact is better, because you can start working on all of those transition issues. We do have students who have personal care attendants on our campus. They want to get those things put in place. We want them connected with health services and other people on campus. And that would be an appropriate accommodation to have early access to registering for classes. And so if you are planning to go to a school and you have some more complex conditions that you want to, you know, ask information about, again, sooner the better. Great.
And here's a point of clarification. Someone did ask in here, what is an IEP? For those that aren't familiar with that.
Sure. An IEP is an individual education plan, and that's what many high schools refer to when they have students who need accommodations, or middle schools.
Great. And I will ask some of these specific questions, and only because I don't know if it's specific to your college, your university or not, but someone did ask about, do you have accommodations for students with visual impairments?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Do you want to answer that one, Larry?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to find that schools, we want you to be successful, period.
Yeah.
So if you are interested in getting an education, in furthering yourself, I can't encourage you enough. Ask those questions, because any student who we admit, we are saying we think you can be successful in our school. So as you go through the process, that's part of what we're doing in admissions. We're actually predicting your future academic success. And so, yes, we have those services. And yes, please ask, and don't be afraid of the admissions person which is what I do, of asking me that question, of telling me about things that you've had to overcome and will have to overcome to be successful. And I can talk to you about the bridge that's going to help you get to that success.
Yeah, I would reiterate that we have students with all different kinds of disabilities who are successful at our college. And certainly we are providing accommodations for students with visual disabilities, absolutely.
And only because it was asked, does that include seeing eye dogs?
Many students on our campus have service animals, so certainly that would include that. Mm-hmm.
Great. Here's a question for the parents. Do parents need a power of attorney documentation to be involved with the decisions for their child, or can the child give permission for the school to communicate with the parent and be involved?
It's usually really with FERPA, it's a permission. So for example, grades. I know every year at the parent orientations that we have, parents are amazed where suddenly they hear, oh, they're not going to automatically be given grades of their son or daughter who's attending MSU. And students sometimes want to use that as a negotiating tool with their parents. But the reality is the students have that ability to provide that access. And of course, you know, there's usually some negotiating back and forth, but basically you don't need to have an attorney involved in this. You just need to have great communication with, you know, your student. That's really the key, is have that communication. And that's part of the magic of the college process too. This is really a great chance for both the student and the parents to work together to find that great place for the next chapter.
Great, thank you. So besides offering facilities, and what about the actual training of faculty? Are they trained to understand students with disabilities and special accommodations?
Yeah, I'm sure Michigan State also does an excellent job of this, but I've been very involved with the academies for teaching and learning centers where I've worked, where we often have workshops for faculty to learn what is universal design for learning. It's teaching students with the broadest range of users. There's no average student anymore. So how do we teach to the students we have in the classroom? And that includes students with disabilities and all different kinds of things that they have going on in their lives. So we provide trainings like that, as well as specific trainings to disabilities for faculty to understand how to work with students. And we've been very, very lucky, again, because of the kind of reputation and priority mission that we have at Whitewater, to have a great open relationship with faculty.
Great. So when kids are on an IEP in high school, are they required, or even before high school even, are they required to take an ACT or SAT test to get into college? And if so, are the scores scrutinized as much?
So I'm going to take that one.
Yep.
So that's really up to the individual institution. And so, you know, one of the things that makes this college admissions process challenging is there's 4,000 plus institutions in the United States. And the only things they agree about are basically that May 1st is when students have to make a decision, and even that seems to keep changing. And I'm not sure there's anything else the 4,000 schools agree on. And so what I encourage you to do is, any school you're thinking about potentially applying, go onto that school's website, not a third-party site again. Go to the admissions pages, and on the admissions pages, you will see requirements for applications. What types of applications, whether test scores are required, what types of test scores. Feel free, when you meet or talk to somebody for admissions, ask what the role in that institution that test scores hold, okay? My guess is in schools that require them, you know, that will be important. Now, Michigan State, up through fall of 20, we've always required either an SAT or an ACT. For the fall of 2021, those who are applying this fall, those juniors in the audience right now, going to be rising seniors, Michigan State University will be test optional. So for any of you that might have some fear of the test results, the Michigan State University green and white door is wide open. But I would encourage all students to remember this about admissions more than anything else. Admissions is looking at your high school career. So that's the courses you took. That's the academic rigor. That's the test results. That's the extracurricular activities. That's the essay you write. That might be challenges you've overcome. Don't hesitate to tell us your story. Your testing is only one part of your story. Sorry, I may have gotten carried away on that.
Yeah, I would only add to that, look for schools that also have programs that help prepare you before you get to school. So something that has like a summer bridge program or something that would help prepare you to be successful once you get into the fall semester.
If someone does come in with special circumstances, will all of their instructors know that they have accommodations or even had accommodations maybe in the past, like in high school?
No. So that's really what I was trying to get at in the presentation, that it's a time for students now to self-identify. Your faculty is not going to know that you had any accommodations in high school. Any kind of accommodations you had are not going to automatically carry over in your transcript or on any of your other admissions materials. The only way an instructor is going to know that you have accommodations is if you apply for services with the Disability or Access Office and actually present the faculty with a plan that you are eligible to receive an accommodation. What faculty will not know is what the disability is. So nobody is allowed to ask the specifics about why you're getting accommodations, and they will not be aware of that unless you decided to self-identify or unless it was something that was really quite obvious. Otherwise, no, that will only happen if you come to an office, apply for services, we decide about the eligibility of what those accommodations are in college, and then the student is required to submit that plan to their instructors.
Thank you. And a number of questions are asking about the timing of maybe the testing that they have received. And so specifically people were asking how recent does a neuropsych test have to be? Or someone else mentioned that in elementary school they were tested and were diagnosed with ADHD. Does the documentation have to be more recent, or what's your experience?
I think the more recent, the better. However, as far as somebody who was diagnosed in elementary school with a learning disability, learning disabilities are lifelong conditions, so it's not going to go away. Most disability service offices know that. So if there's a more recent IEP with some diagnostic information that the student has a learning disability, specific learning disability in reading or math, and that was just done within the last few years of high school, that would be perfectly acceptable in most cases. If it's something different than that, then probably a more recent document from a medical professional. So for ADHD, if it was something that a student had as a second grader but never was tested again for, I would say that the student would need to go to a psychologist or a therapist and have some form of documentation from a licensed professional, even a medical provider, about something like that. It doesn't have to be necessarily a full neuropsych, but again, the more information we have, the better able we are to assess with the student in conversation in that interactive process about what's going to help them in their functional limitations once they get to college and be successful.
Thank you. So there's a couple questions regarding vocational rehab, and just asking if you could expand upon that a little bit, and maybe any resources for that.
Well, you can look in your home state. So in Wisconsin, it's Department of Vocational Rehab Services or Department of Health Services. They will have counselors who can assist families and students regarding career choice, transitioning for additional services. It's a resource through the state that any family can access through their own state. I know in Wisconsin, students from Illinois can also access services through vocational rehab services in Wisconsin. So sometimes you can do it in the state that you're attending. I don't know how that might be in Michigan or other states. It's just another resource to look into that you can also ask a case manager about too.
Okay. And so like the two schools represented here, are there any other resources for identifying schools similar to yours that have a robust learning center or disability center?
So
Larry,
again, I think any school, you go onto their website, just in the search box right away, just type that in and see what you get. And I think very quickly you're going to get a sense of what's available, how important it is to that college, university, institution of education. I think that's honestly a great way to start. I think also when you go to college fairs, whether they be virtual or in person, to do that. I think also as you get information, you can call the admissions office as well and ask those schools what they have available. I think just hearing the knowledge level of admissions staff of those services and what's provided is going to, again, give you an idea of that culture and whether it's going to be supportive for you.
And I know you've covered this, but it's been asked in a number of different ways, and I think it's worth revisiting. It's just, will students who are asking for services, will that affect their acceptance in any way?
It absolutely will not.
No.
What we ultimately care about is a student's ability to be successful, and that has been demonstrated by what they've done in high school.
Great. Yeah, that question was asked a lot in a number of different ways. So thank you for just being clear on it.
In fact, I would suggest that if a student's had a good experience in high school and has overcome a lot and it is a part of their story, as Larry had said, it's good information to share their story about how they've been a successful student. And then admissions offices can identify other resources that are available to them and help guide them a little bit better. So I think it's a good idea to go ahead and do that.
So another question, and I guess this is depending on the disability, but do you have any thoughts on choosing between quarterly or semester systems? Some schools they're looking at have quarter system, and others, and so they said they have some reservations as to what might work best.
I would have to say it's really up to the individual student. I think there are some students who may be able to focus better on a fewer number of classes in a shorter amount of time in a quarter system, and other students that might find that extremely challenging. So again, the more you know about how you learn, how you process, for a student who takes a little additional time for any reason processing information, maybe a quarter system isn't great, but again, if a student gets bored easily and that's the reason they check out on some other reason, that they're not going to be successful, then maybe a quarter system is a perfect option.
And that's where it comes back again to that word of fit, and fit is individual. It is, every school is not a fit for every single student. And so that's why we can't emphasize enough, ask those questions with every school you talk to, and take that inventory. And then also, again, it's about thinking about yourself and what are your strengths, what are your limitations, What are your atmospheres that you do well?
Thank you. Well, Deborah and Larry, I thank you so much for sharing your expertise on this important topic. I will remind our attendees here that this is recorded once again. So it will take overnight for the recording to be processed, but it will be posted up on the website. So that again, if you go to virtual.GoToCollegeFairs.com, this will be uploaded and available for you to play again tomorrow. Thank you once again to our panelists. I would like to remind you to explore your college options in our virtual college fair. We have hundreds of interactive virtual booths where you can watch videos, download materials, and even chat live with admissions representatives from that institution. You'll also find that some booths have a schedule of their own live stream video presentations. So make sure you visit that today or come back while the event is still live to enjoy those experiences. Thank you for joining us. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Good luck with your search.
Thank you.